Hi, my name is Susan Liebes. I'm a trustee on the Fallbrook Union Elementary School District Board and a parent of one of our students. And I'm happy to join you for Alair today and to read this book to you called Soldier for Equality. And this book is in our Sora online library, so you can actually check this out yourself if you want to read it again or share it with somebody else. And I want to apologize if I mispronounce any of the names or Spanish words or French words in this book. I'm going to do my best, but I might not say them exactly right. So please pardon me if I don't. So this book is called Soldier for Equality, Jose de la Luz Sáenz and the Great War. And it's written by Duncan Tonotia. Not sure I said that one right. I love the artwork in this book. Soldier for Equality, to Maximo Tonotiu, a teacher and a warrior. Greaser! Luz ran toward the boy and tackled him to the ground. Luz had had enough. Ya basta! Why did they call him names? Why were those kids mean to him just because his family had come from Mexico? Senor Sáenz was not happy that his son, Jose de la Luz, had been in a fight again, but he understood his frustration. He too was not always treated with respect. Luz's abuela had come to the United States more than 25 years ago. Luz and his brothers and sisters were born here. The family was as American as the kids who tormented him. Luz knew that people of Mexican origin worked hard just like everyone else. They worked in offices, in schools, in fields, on railroad tracks, and in mines. But many people in Texas, where Luz was born, mistreated them. Tejano children were forced to attend separate and inferior schools. Businesses had signs that said, "No Mexicans allowed." "Luz, I don't want you to fight," said his father, "but don't let anyone make you feel ashamed. You should always be proud of who you are, mijo." Luz never forgot what his father said. His teachers and family friends also encouraged him to feel proud of his roots. He graduated from high school in Alice, Texas in 1905. He then attended a school to become a teacher. Luz knew that knowledge was a weapon that helped you defend yourself against those who were mean to you or ignored your rights. He wanted to make sure kids understood this too. Luz married Maria Petra Esparza, and they started a family. At a school near San Antonio, he taught kids in the morning and adults who did not know how to read at night. His students were of Mexican descent like him. Luz enjoyed teaching them, but he felt frustrated too. His school was a small shack. The school with the white children attended was larger and nicer. No es justo. It was not right. Will things ever change? Is there anything I can do? Thought Luz. One day in the middle of the school year, Luz did not show up to class. He had volunteered to join the army. In 1914, much of Europe was at war. Great Britain, France, Russia, and the other Allied countries were fighting against Germany and the Central Powers. In April 1917, the United States joined the Allies. It was to be called the Great War, or World War I. After saying goodbye to his family on February 25, 1918, Luz arrived at Camp Travis, a military facility where thousands of men from Texas and Oklahoma trained to become soldiers. Luz joined the Army because he believed it was his duty to serve his country. He wanted to demonstrate that Mexican Americans loved America and would give their lives fighting for it. After they see the sacrifices we are willing to make, the people who mistreat us will start treating us fairly, con igualdad y justicia. While he was at training camp, Luz met Americans of different backgrounds. He met Native Americans from Oklahoma. They also had faced discrimination and hoped for a better future after they fought in the war. Luz was excited when he met other Mexican American soldiers. He made many friends, but became especially close to Eulogio Gomez and Eduardo Barrera. Luz was happy to be training. He got along with most of his fellow soldiers regardless of their backgrounds, but he had negative experiences too. The worst was when an officer called him greaser in front of the others and laughed. This army will fight against tyrannical rulers and injustice in Europe, he thought. How is it possible that some officers here can be so unfair to their own countrymen? On June 6, 1918, after more than 3 months of training, Luz and the other soldiers from the 360th Regiment of the 90th Division of the U.S. Army began their journey to the war. They traveled on a train to New York City, where they boarded the ship Olympic and headed to Europe. The trip across the Atlantic Ocean was not easy. The soldiers were tightly packed below decks. They slept in hammocks next to one another. Luz often felt seasick. At night, he thought of Maria Petra and their children at home and wrote in his diary, "I hope they are proud of me and that my efforts help them and others like us. Espero que están orgullosos." The 360th Regiment landed in England on June 21st. From there, they boarded another ship that took them to France. They did not go right away to the French front where the fighting was. Instead, they were sent to Rouvres-sur-Aube, a town where the soldiers received additional training. In his spare time, Luz studied French. He understood a lot of the language because it had some similarity to Spanish, which he knew perfectly well. After some weeks, he was able to read French with the help of a dictionary. Some soldiers teased him. "Do you think that speaking French to the Germans will stop their bullets?" But it wasn't long before other soldiers were bringing Luz newspapers, so he would translate for them the news about the war. On August 18th, the 360th Regiment began marching to the front. When they arrived in the St. Mihiel region, they saw for the first time the famous trenches that soldiers had dug to protect themselves from the enemy attacks. Luz met soldiers there who were exhausted from constant gunfire, rain, mud, and cold. Before it was Luz's turn at the trenches, he was called to a fortified command post in the rear. A colonel needed someone to translate a French message. Luz did so with ease. The colonel was satisfied with his work and assigned Luz to the intelligence office. There, Luz would receive communications, translate messages, and relay them to others. That night, Luz wrote in his diary, August 24th, "Now that I am in a hole 35 feet underground, I can tell my friends that books literally helped me build a protective trench around me." Although Luz was not in the trenches, he was still in danger. German planes dropped bombs on the 360th Regiment, some exploding very close by. Things were not easy for Luz at the intelligence office either. Luz often felt frustrated that he did not receive the credit he deserved for his work. Was it because he was Mexican American? "I'm a plain foot soldier, but I serve in a position that is for commissioned officers. If I'm capable of doing the job, why not promote me in rank? Not for self-serving reasons, but to be fair." At night, while trying to sleep, Luz could hear the cannon thunder when the artillery units fired at one another. "If we survive," he later told Gomez and Barrera, "we should create an organization that looks after the soldiers of Mexican origin that fought in this war." In France, Luz saw many men fall in combat and others die from wounds and illnesses at the field hospital. When he learned that Pepe Gonzalez, a fellow Mexican-American soldier, had died, he hurried with Gomez to the funeral. They went to the Army's makeshift graveyard as fast as they could. By the time they arrived, Gonzalez was already buried. Luz decided to write a letter to the man's father. "Mr. Doroteo Gonzalez, we offered a prayer by his grave and asked that his sacrifice not have been in vain, but that it contributes to the betterment of our poorly appreciated people." Weeks after arriving, the 360th Regiment was part of a successful battle in the St. Mihiel region. The German army began to retreat. Over the next month and a half, the Allies kept advancing and gaining territory. Although Luz carried a rifle, a bayonet, a dozen grenades, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, he had not fired a single shot. He and the other soldiers in the intelligence office were ordered not to by their superiors. Their job was to receive communications and relay them to others. On November 10th, however, Luz was told to get ready. The next day, the American forces were going to engage in their largest attack yet. Every available man was going to be part of it. That night, Luz could barely sleep. At dawn, he and the rest of the soldiers would charge toward the enemy. They would not have any cover against the Germans' gunfire. Luz knew thousands would die trying to overpower their opponents. Cyans, wake up!" It was still dark when a soldier woke Luz up and told him to report to the intelligence office. He learned that Germany had asked for a ceasefire. The major assault the American forces had planned was canceled. At 11 a.m. on November 11th, 1918, the fighting officially ended. Although the combat stopped, the war was not officially over. Germany had asked for a ceasefire so that the different nations involved in the war could negotiate peace terms. Some American forces were going to stay in Europe while the negotiations took place. Instead of being sent home, Luz received orders to join the march to Germany. The 360th Regiment arrived at Zeltingen, Germany on December 12th. Luz spent Christmas and New Year's there. He saw a town covered in snow for the first time. It didn't snow like that back home in South Texas. During the day, Luz worked in the intelligence office. In the evenings, he began teaching English to Mexican-American soldiers he had met who could not speak the language well. I have to help my own, he thought. Tengo que ayudar a mi gente. Luz had met many soldiers of Mexican descent during his time in the war. He wanted to bring them all together so they could share their experience. On March 3rd, 1919, he organized a gathering of all the Mexican Americans in the 360th Regiment. More than 50 soldiers came. They ate and told stories. They talked about families back home, and they discussed creating an organization once they were back in the States to fight for their rights. Luz even gave a speech. Our hearts should be filled with satisfaction, he said, because Mexican Americans risked their own lives to fulfill their duty. Debemos sentir orgullo. On May 17th, the men of the 360th Regiment left Germany and began their trip home. When they arrived in San Antonio, they were greeted by their families and loved ones at the train station. Luz embraced Maria Petra and their children, who were waiting for him eagerly. American soldiers of different backgrounds paraded through South Flores, Commerce, Alamo Plaza, and some of the major avenues in San Antonio. Thousands of people watched. Luz saw friends, fellow teachers, and even those he didn't know cheering for him and the other soldiers. As he marched, Luz noticed that the ground was covered with flowers. Everyone is so happy and grateful to have us home, thought Luz. He was filled with joy, alegría. Luz's happiness faded quickly. He returned to the classroom to teach and realized that things had not improved for the people of Mexican origin after the war like he had hoped they would. Mexican-American children were still being sent to separate and inferior schools. Businesses still had signs that said, "No Mexicans allowed." It was time to bring to life the idea of an organization to fight for the rights of Mexican Americans. The veterans he already knew were ready to join him. Other people of Mexican origin who lived in Texas wanted to join Luz too. I did not fight in the war, said one of Luz's friends, but I supported the war effort. I worked extra hard in the field so the soldiers could have the food they needed. I even bought a Liberty Bond to help the government fund the army. We did our part. Why are we still being mistreated? Queremos igualdad y justicia. There were war veterans of Mexican origin in other parts of Texas who were also organizing. Two of them were Manuel Gonzalez and Alonso Perales from San Antonio, who helped form the Order of the Sons of America and the Sons of Texas. Luz met with them, and they agreed to help one another. In the years to come, the three men, as well as other Mexican-American civil rights leaders, wrote articles and traveled throughout Texas to give speeches. They worked hard to get more people involved. Eventually, Luz and the others decided to unite and create one large organization so it could have more impact. I am convinced, said Luz during a speech, that we should create one single union. It will give us the opportunity to claim our rights, said Perales, which is the best thing we can do for our children. On February 17, 1929, 10 years after the war ended, at a convention in Corpus Christi, Texas, the League of the United Latin American Citizens was born. Luz remained a member of LULAC for many years to come. The organization was involved in several cases that helped end the segregation of Mexican American and Latinx children from all white schools. Luz continued writing articles and giving speeches to fight against racism and prejudice. He wanted the signs that said "No Mexicans Allowed" to disappear. Luz had proudly fought with the United States Army in Europe for the ideals of a democracy and justice. Now he fought on the home front in Texas for those same ideals. Democracia y justicia. He fought for equality, igualdad. And there's a lot more information here about the history and all kinds of other things that you can read about, and even see a picture of Luz right there. I love reading about World War II history. I think it's really interesting. And but I didn't know about this story. So I'm so glad that I was able to join you for Alair and learn about a new part of history that I didn't know about. So I hope you all enjoyed this story, and I hope you will keep reading and learning.